Hello, my name is Kai, and welcome to the Theoretical YouTube channel, where we've done this before. We've basically done this before. Take a Disney Channel cartoon and say it's somehow connected to Gravity Falls, even though it pretty much isn't. Seriously, most of that theory hinged on an ottoman being the dead version of a thing that literally doesn't exist in the title sequence of Phineas and Ferb. But today's theory? Oh boy, there is so much more to unpack with the Owl House. For one, the Owl House just feels a lot more like Gravity Falls, and it's not a coincidence. The two shows' staff shares people like Dana Terrace, the creator of the Owl House and an integral member of the team at Gravity Falls, and Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls and an integral member of the team at the Owl House. But other people who worked on Gravity Falls went on to make their own things like Amphibia and Big City Greens, and Alex Hirsch himself even went on to voice a few characters in Star vs. the Forces of Evil after Gravity Falls. But this one feels different from those, and it shows that people are already starting to call the Owl House the spiritual successor to Gravity Falls. It's not just that Dana Terrace and Alex Hirsch are working on it, but it's also the secret codes hidden in the background of scenes and in episode titles, and the overall sense of absurdist and yet clever comedy mixed with horrifying visuals wrapped in Disney wrapping paper with a bow that says Kids Show on it. But none of this actually proves that these worlds are connected, so if I'm gonna prove that, first we're gonna have to roll the intro. Alright, so if we're going to be discussing the Owl House, and you just clicked on this video for more Gravity Falls content, and have no idea what that is, just go watch the Owl House. It's a really good show, and the entire first season is on Disney Plus right now. But I guess if you don't have time to watch 19 25-minute episodes in the next minute or so, here's a quick rundown. The Owl House follows our protagonist Luz, a human girl who accidentally finds her way into the demon realm while trying to retrieve a stolen book. She soon finds out that her book was stolen by Edalyn, the Owl Lady, or Eda for short. Eda is somewhat of a con artist. She steals items from the human world and then goes back to the Boiling Isles, the main setting for our show, to sell them to various witches, monsters, and demons that live there. But Eda's business isn't the only thing that makes her a criminal. A little later on, we learn that Eda is being hunted down by the Emperor of the Boiling Isles because she refused to join a coven when she graduated from school. Oh, wait, I should probably explain the coven system. Covens, yes. Okay, about 50 years ago, Emperor Bellows ended the Savage Ages by establishing the coven system. During the Savage Ages, witches and demons ran amok using all kinds of wild magic and causing chaos, but Bellows had a solution to this problem. When a witch came of age, they would choose a specific coven, and from that point forward, their magic would be limited to that coven. Which is great for broad covens like animal handling, but not so great for smaller sub-covens like
Big Dog Coven, Small Cat Coven, Tiniest Cat Coven.
Then there's the Emperor's Coven, which is able to use all of their magic, but they are under the direct order of the Emperor. And pretty much every witch we see in the show is either in one of these covens or is on a track in school to join one of these covens. Every witch except for Eda, and that's what makes her the most powerful witch on the Boiling Isles. Anyway, Luz meets Eda, they go on an adventure to retrieve a Burger Queen crown for Eda's roommate King, the King of Demons. Luz decides to stay in the demon realm because the alternative is literally a summer camp designed to stop you from being creative, and Eda agrees to give Luz a place to stay and mentor her while she's there. And that's pretty much the first episode. Later on we meet some more characters like Amity, Gus, and Willow, who Luz goes to school with, and if I need to explain anything else, I could just bring it up when we get there. So here we go. The evidence connecting these two worlds comes in varying degrees of conclusiveness, so let's just start out with a few of the less convincing points. First, we already discussed how the two shows' creative teams share a lot of people, and thus the shows have a very similar vibe about them. But again, Alex Hirsch just being in two shows is not nearly conclusive enough to say these worlds are connected. If that were true, Gravity Falls would be connected to Amphibia, Big City Greens, We Bare Bears, Wander Over Yonder, Fish Hooks, Phineas and Ferb, and Rick and Morty. Well, actually there is something to say about those last two. And probably more about Rick and Morty. So what else can we point to these two shows being connected? Well, as we also already mentioned, the worlds in which these shows inhabit feel very similar. Both shows thrive off of the idea of weirdness. In Gravity Falls, it's what makes the town interesting and the whole reason Ford went there to study his grand unified theory of weirdness. And in the Owl House, weirdness is what brings the characters together in the first place.
Us weirdos have to stick together.
It's like the whole point of the first episode. And then there's the codes hidden everywhere in Gravity Falls, like at the end of the episodes, as well as in the background of the Owl House and when viewing the episode titles as an acrostic. And on a more thematic note, one of the main ideas of Gravity Falls is family. Specifically the relationship between siblings, and even more specifically, the special bond shared between twins. And what do you know, the Owl House has its very own set of twins in the form of Amira and Edric Blight. But the Blight twins aren't nearly important enough characters to be analogous to, say, Dipper and Mabel. They're definitely supposed to be more of the Weasley twins of this story. Actually, they're exactly like the Weasley twins. Wait a minute. But there is an Owl House analog for the second most important set of twins in Gravity Falls, the Clawthorne Sisters. While Ida and Lilith aren't technically twins, they still graduated in the same year, which makes Lilith no more than a year older than Ida. And other than them not having the exact same birthday, their relationship is a near-perfect match to that of the Stans. They grew up as close as siblings could be, but as they aged, a bitter rivalry began to emerge. One of them became an academic who knew that the only way to get ahead was by earning it, while the other slacked off, causing trouble wherever they went, and eventually became a scam artist. This difference between the two led to one eventful day, which left one in a terrible position and the other trying desperately to make it right. These characters also act as mentor figures to our main characters, with the academic one being introduced a bit later than the first one. But this is by far the least conclusive evidence in this whole theory. I mean, twins are only really important in Gravity Falls if you start to take into account the Aztec god Xolotl, and how deformity is actually defined on a culture-by-culture basis. But who wants to do that? Let's just get into the good stuff. One step up from sharing narrative elements like themes or character archetypes is a shared set of rules between the worlds. For instance, a magic system. Even if you stripped all of the story out of Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, you can still reasonably conclude that they exist in the same world because of the fairly unique magic system that they share. Each of their worlds shares the same set of rules for bending, whereas a magic system like Harry Potter's is completely incompatible with one like Star Wars. Then again, the prequels kind of ignored their own magic system anyway, so... But when it comes to Gravity Falls and the Owl House, we're not going to be dealing with their magic system, since Gravity Falls relies on more of a practical scientific approach than straight magic. I mean, Probabilitor is the only literal wizard we see in the show, and he still uses the power of math to cast spells. The shared system that we will be referencing from each of these shows is actually how memory works in both worlds. Starting with Gravity Falls, we first see how memories are represented in the episode Dreamscapers. In this episode, the characters venture into Stan's mind in an attempt to stop Bill from stealing the code to Stan's safe, so Gideon can steal the deed to the Mystery Shack. As if Gideon having the deed in his hand actually means he owns the Mystery Shack. But I don't think that's how that works. We see that Stan's mind is set up like a classic mind palace, a technique developed by the ancient Greek and Roman rhetorical circles where they would hold frequent memory contests, which is either really cool or really lame. The technique basically has you imagine your mind as a giant palace, with different rooms and passages that lead to information that you might want to recall in the future. And when you do want to recall that, you just follow the paths to get there, and then you'll have a better time remembering. And in the show, we see that Stan's palace is a version of the Mystery Shack, but it's just as chaotic and disorganized as you might imagine Stan's mind to be. The important thing to note here is that every memory, or at least the important ones, are hidden behind doors that you can open and step into. Now let's move on to the Owl House, where we can see the memory system in the episode Understanding Willow, in which Amity burns all of Willow's memories on accident, and she and Luz have to go in to repair them. When they go into Willow's mind, we can see that her memory is set up in the exact same way, with a mind palace. But instead of a building, Willow's mind is a forest because of her connection with plants. In Willow's mind, every tree has a painting inset in it that depicts a memory, and Luz and Amity can actually crawl into these paintings, Super Mario Bros. Style, and interact with the memories, just like in Gravity Falls. In fact, the memory systems in each of these shows is so similar that the way memories are destroyed is the exact same. Fire. When Willow gets her mind erased, it's the fire that Amity used to destroy her memories in the first place, and when Stan gets his mind erased, it's the fire that's most associated with Bill's cipher, like when he makes deals or burns the journals. But people use mind palaces in the real world, and granted they aren't as tangible as in these shows, but it's still not too uncommon of an idea. So let's move on to our next set of connections, direct references between the shows. Now, since Gravity Falls ended in 2016 and the Owl House only began in 2020, one might assume that the most references between the shows are actually in the Owl House to Gravity Falls. But somehow, it's the exact other way around. I mean, to be fair, there are no Owl House connections in the Gravity Falls TV show that anyone has found yet. And, I mean, it makes sense, since they probably didn't know what the Owl House was really gonna be at the time, so they weren't gonna be able to put an Easter egg in their show. However, by 2018, they seem to have just reached the sweet spot where they knew enough about the Owl House, and they were still making bonus content for Gravity Falls. Take this for example. This is a Gravity Falls graphic novel written by Alex Hirsch and partially illustrated by Dana Terrace that was published by Disney on July 24th, 2018. And in the very first story, Dipper and Pacifica find their way to the Crawl Space, a supernatural place that Ford's journals describe as a paranormal black market known only to thieving creatures of the night. But that's not really what I care about. What I really care about is, what the heck is that? Directly to the right of the page on the crawl space in Ford's journals is a page on the Boiling Isles, and all we can read from that page is, Legend True Wit Doe. So, that's helpful. But what this means is that Ford has either been to, or at least knows enough about the Boiling Isles to write a page in his journal about it. But when could he have made this discovery? Well, it could have been during his 30 years of dimension hopping, since we know that he continued to write in Journal 3 about his travels when he got back to Gravity Falls. Unfortunately, we don't actually know which journal this is in though, because earlier in the story, Ford gives Dipper all 3 journals. However, Dipper does say that he'd read about the crawl space before, and this would be around the same time that Ford is writing about his travels through the portal. Which means he must have learned about the Boiling Isles before he even left through the portal, but the only direct path between the Boiling Isles and the human realm is Ida's magic door. So, unless Ida had been to Gravity Falls before... Enter my next point. Just before the shot of the journal that we get that reveals the Boiling Isles, there is a 2-page spread establishing the crawl space. And hidden in this image is one of the first major clues that these two worlds are connected. Here, I'll give you a few seconds to spot it. You see, it's like a terrifying Where's Waldo, filled with horrible monsters, and even worse puns. Okay, did you find it yet? It's the platypus, distant cousins to the platypus, proof that this is the same world as Phineas and Ferb. Oh, wait, wrong theory. It's actually that wanted poster right there that depicts a character that looks suspiciously like a witch we've come to know since then. Actually, it's not even suspicious. That is Ida, Idalyn, the Owl Lady, whatever you want to call her. She's got the crazy hair, the shifty eyes, the pointed ears, the weird earrings. And Ida's business is literally to sell stolen human goods to monsters, making the crawl space the perfect place for her to set up a booth. But it's also not too hard to imagine that she got kicked out. And so she probably hopped into her magic door and sold her contraband to some other sucker. You really could call her a door-to-door salesman. That was a forced joke, but a perfect segue, because you know who would call her exactly that? Stanford Pines. In Journal 3, in a section on cursed doors, he describes doors that come and go and people who disappear inside of them. And there is even a depiction of a door he once saw that looks a lot like Ida's, with a caption next to it that says, Devious Door-to-Door Salesman. On the next page, he also specifically recounts a time when a door appeared in his basement and stole his calculator. I mean, come on, if that's not conclusive proof that Ida has directly interacted with characters from Gravity Falls, then I actually have something else to show you. Once again, in July of 2018, Gravity Falls released a piece of content that draws a direct connection to Idalyn the Owl Lady. But this time, it wasn't in the Lost Legends book. It was actually, strangely enough, in a commentary track by Grunkle Stan himself on the episode The Land Before Swine in the DVD box set. You know, because this was before you could just watch all of Gravity Falls at 3 AM on Disney Plus if you wanted. In this commentary track, Stan is supposed to be watching the episode with you and giving his personal insight as not only a character, but also the person who caused the whole mess in the first place. But as Stan is often wont to do, he just spends most of the time talking about himself, which is not the intended purpose, but it's great for us because it gives us more of his backstory. Throughout this track, it's pretty clear that Alex Hirsch was just having fun riffing on what the character would probably say, but there are a few things that you can tell he wanted to put in there because they're kinda just shoehorned in. For instance, just after he finishes defending himself, saying that he wasn't actually going to let Waddles get eaten by a dinosaur, he abruptly switches topics.
Like, how many of you looking at this video right now, how many of you think that I'm gonna let this pig get eaten by a monster? Is that what you think of me? Not gonna do it. Not gonna happen. The Fez.
And then he goes on to drop some hints about his father's secret history with the Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel and how he might actually have a Masonic birthright? It's one of the less discussed mysteries left at the end of the show, but nonetheless one that has never really been solved. Another moment in the commentary that feels a bit forced is when he runs out of things to talk about in the middle and he just resorts to his old reliable.
So, let's see, jokes. I told you about my medical problems, Alright, okay, I know what Dipper wants to hear. I know why he asked me to do this. He wants to know a little bit about the real Grunkle Stan. You know, you guys see this paragon of attractiveness and virtue. You don't learn the warts and all. You probably want to hear about my ex-wife, right?
Before this, we'd only heard about Stan's wife twice before. First in the iconic joke,
"My ex-wife still misses me, but her aim is getting better. Her aim is getting better."
which doesn't tell us much. Then there was the brief paragraph written by Dipper in Journal 3 about one of the memories he saw from Stan, in which he married a woman named Marilyn in Las Vegas for only 48 hours, before he realized she was just tricking him so she could make off with his car and all of his loot. Which sounds an awful lot like our witch in question, but admittedly this could just be a coincidence. However, in this commentary track, we get even more details on that day, particularly a better description of Marilyn. First, he says that she had hair like an airline stewardess and a bright pink shirt that said over 30 and very flirty, but he also says that both her hair and name were fake. Then he lists two particularly distinguishable features.
That pale bingo hall skin, that one weirdly sharp tooth.
These two things alone already sound quite a bit like Ida, but pair that with this picture of concept art where she wears a shirt that says 30 and flirty, or this picture from the actual show where she wears a bright pink shirt and holds a mug that says 30 and flirty, and I think this has graduated from just a coincidence. Finally, when Stan describes her getaway, he says that she was chased by cops for a mile out of Vegas before
ducking out a door and into a canyon and making off with all my loot.
I'm sorry, what? She jumped through a door and into a canyon. Two questions. Why was there a door that leads to a canyon? And how is jumping into a canyon a successful getaway? Unless Marilyn was Ida and she didn't land in the canyon. Okay, maybe you're still not convinced. Maybe pink fire is too different from blue fire, and that page in the journal just said the boiling island, and maybe there's another jagged-toothed confidence woman with a magic door running around Gravity Falls' world. But there is one reference to Gravity Falls in the Owl House that I have not mentioned yet, and it is a cameo by a character so iconic it couldn't possibly be a coincidence. In a show filled with demons, it makes sense that the one character from Gravity Falls to show up is the dream demon from the second dimension himself, Bill Cipher. If you didn't notice him yourself, then I don't blame you. It took us watching this scene 2 to 3 times before we finally spotted him. But he's right there, on a sticky note half covered in King's Demons 101 lecture in the episode The Intruder. And that's Bill alright. Maybe you could tell me that a triangle with an eye in it isn't too uncommon of a symbol, but that top hat is unmistakable. And this is certainly the most important Easter egg in the whole show for me, because it leads me into my grander theory of the connection between these two shows. I believe that Bill Cipher not only exists in the world of the Owl House, but he plays a much larger role than a half-covered sticky note in a lecture. I have gathered significant evidence and reason to believe that Bill Cipher is not only back, but he is actually the real big bad behind the entire Owl House story. But this has gone on quite enough, so that's going to have to be a whole nother video. But trust me, it's gonna be good. Yes, this video was kind of a trick, but it needed to happen. The whole point of this video was just to set up our next Owl House theory, but I couldn't just make wild accusations about Bill Cipher being the big bad in a whole different show without first proving that those shows can be connected. I hope you'll forgive me. But hey, I think that officially makes this our first two-parter, so that's cool. And it's not like this video was a total wash. There was still a lot of good research and evidence put into making it. So, what did you think? Much better than our Gravity Falls and Phineas and Ferb one? I still don't know how to feel about that one. It's like, good, but not good. Maybe we're all just sad that Gravity Falls has ended, and this is our coping mechanism. If you're also sad, make sure to tell us in the comment section down there. While you're down there, you can also like this video if you did, and subscribe if you don't want to miss the next Owl House video. Trust me, it's one of my favorite theories I've ever written. But if you're looking for more theories right now, we've got a whole playlist right there, and if you want more Owl House specific content, we've got a video right here. You can also follow us on Twitter at Theory_Central, or become a patron on Patreon. Seriously, I didn't care about our Patreon for a while, because we didn't have any patrons, but someone did it. They doubled our monthly income. Thanks, David W. or D20 Dave. But that's all there is in this video, so for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.
You see, it's funny because marriage is terrible.